Welcome to a geometric conjecture for nature's raison d'etre. Here we generate our master maps to rationalize and define properties of fundamental particles, and much else besides. And however comforting or discomforting it may be, we cannot ignore the remarkable corroboration with the standard model of particle physics, as depicted here. And that alone demands deep examination. We'll begin by laying down three brutal truths. In any conceivable universe, no single entity exists in isolation, for there simply must be some contrast for it to emerge. No entity-contrast duality exists in isolation, for there simply must be some substrate substantiating them. No entity-contrast substrate trinity exists in isolation, for a thing cannot exist as a thing in itself. Nature manifests eventfully, constantly jiggling, each part substantiating each other part in reciprocity. Likewise, a magnitude has no meaning in isolation. It only becomes meaningful collectively and in contrast with other magnitudes, as a scale. And insofar as we attribute some contrivance to it, we attach some meaning to it. Thus, nature is an abstraction of mathematics, a contrast in scale, a priori exordium of trinities, whereby recursive infinities are moderated with a quorum of trinities construct, such that four trinities construe a quorum. We may consider the fourth phantom as everything else, ourselves, or whatever floats your philosophy, and not argue the semantics. And that is the philosophical genesis of master maps, eviscerated with anything more plausible. Entities are engineered from colored paper, with each recursively resolving such that every fourth successive quadrant is glued in either clockwise or counterclockwise corkscrew formation. Considering a progressive corkscrew ad infinitum is open to speculation. Here, we simply utilize four trinities, each comprised of three entities or colors. North and south rotate opposite to east and west, bestowing each a complementary geometry. Our four trinities are laced together, and an interaction is said to occur whenever two entities or colors are face to face. Here's the fully laced assembly, resembling a torus, a nexus, or screwed up ball. And by unlacing the back part of it, we can model the inner mechanism. As each trinity rotates in corkscrew fashion, a particular combination of interactions or combination of colors manifest for every 90-degree rotation of each trinity. All we do is compute all such combinations, and voila! We metaphorically mathematize existence. The 729 interactions are compiled in a spreadsheet, generating a 9-digit code. Here's a schematic example of 9 of those codes. We then represent each code as a knot in our master maps. Bearing in mind, there are 3 unique ways to populate any map. By first populating the local nests, we generate master map 1. Or by first populating global branches, we generate master map 2, noting here that from our vantage, branches in master map 2 run vertically. Or by first populating local trunks, we generate master map 3. And by extrapolation, all 729 knots are generated in the same fashion. We'll inspect some of those knots in master map 1. Knot 1 has a code that replicates 6 times, so we attribute a value or weight of 6 to those knots. And we find this hexad of knots is just one of 6 sister sets. We distinguish them by coloring them green. Knot 2 has a code that replicates twice, so we assign a weight of 2 to those knots. Similarly, knots 6, 8, and 12 each replicate twice, so we assign each of those knots a weight of 2, distinguishing them in pale colored orange, green, or blue, and we find there are 111 such pairings in each map. Knot 3 has a code that does not replicate. No other knot shares that code. So we assign a weight of 1 to that knot and find there are 159 singletons, distinguished in pale grey or purple. Knot 5 has a code that replicates 3 times. So we assign a weight of 3 to those knots and colour them yellow. And we find 72 sets of triplets. Knot 10 has a code that replicates 8 times. So we assign those knots a weight of 8 and colour them blue. There are 6 sets of such octets. Knot 15 replicates 4 times. So we assign a weight of 4 to those knots and colour them orange. And we find 12 sets of these quadruplets. Here's a closer inspection of 9 codes and the corresponding nest of 9 knots. The purple Z2 code occurs once. No other knot shares that code. However, the yellow F2 code occurs 3 times, and the yellow A2 code occurs 3 times, while the green 4 code occurs 6 times. The yellow B2 code occurs 3 times, and the yellow C2 code occurs 3 times, while the green 6 code occurs 6 times, and so it goes on. The yellow D2 code occurs 3 times, as does the yellow E2 code occur 3 times. We conclude by sequencing the 3 possible ways to generate a map. Remember, by first populating the local nests, we generate master map 1, or by first populating global branches, we generate master map 2, or by first populating local trunks, we generate master map 3. Rather fortuitously, my findings are best conveyed visually through simple geometry, such as we've seen here, where complex mathematics is largely unnecessary. And yet, before positing that the world is no longer queerer than we can suppose, we ought to concede that it is likely to be as queer as some can suppose. In this regard, the village ought to be mindful. To the comfort of many and discomfort of a few, all matters of magnitude, space, mathematics, consciousness, appear to be intelligibly unified here, subject to nature's brutal integrity, an integrity housed in these master maps. Herein, this series of short videos, nature is whispering. All we need do is listen.